I think we're good to go.
For my audio. Can you hear it now?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, good. I want to welcome everyone and thank you all for being here. I want to introduce Catlin, who has been saving me and helping me with everything to put the book in the world. She's built my new website and handled all the crises that have come up and helped me through it all. And so thank you, Catlin Robinson. And she is going to interview me tonight. She has some questions and we're looking for your questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat. You don't have to wait for any certain moment. We'll do more of that later. But I've done a couple of live events, and the greatest delight for me is to be in conversation, because the book is not a how-to book. It's not a diary. It is a conversation itself. And my hope is that it will be company for anyone who reads it. So I'll turn it over to you, Catlin.
I feel like just about everybody knows who Jocelyn is, but just in case, I'm going to do a brief introduction in case there's a few of you out there who are new to her work. So Jocelyn began her career as a singer. She studied jazz and popular music and has had quite a prolific career, both as a musician and as a music teacher. And when she was diagnosed with late stage ovarian cancer, it began a transformation for her that I feel like has been an ongoing gift to the world, in beginning with speaking engagements that came out of her experience with ovarian cancer. And those speaking engagements came together as this book, which has brought us here today. She continues her work as a music teacher, obviously is doing good work in putting this book and the message in it out into the world, and will continue to expand that work, doing inspirational speaking and speaking gigs, not just for people living with cancer and caregivers, but really for anybody who has been touched by life-threatening illness and needing hope in their life for whatever reason. So I think the message is so much broader. Obviously, it centers around life-threatening illness, but it really is so much broader than that. So we're going to start with some questions that I've prepared. I would love, as Jocelyn said, for you to gather questions as we go. You can put them in the chat, and then later when we come to the question period, we'll use those as a launch pad and then hopefully start a conversation. So as I said, just housekeeping, I'm going to keep everybody muted while we're doing the beginning interview and then the reading, and then feel free to unmute. Just know that we are streaming live to Facebook. So if you unmute and don't want to be seen, just keep your camera off. And we'd love to see your face, obviously, but I understand from a privacy perspective that that's not for everybody. So shall we jump in?
Mm-hmm.
So Jocelyn, you recently spoke in person in Toronto, and you were interviewed by Don Morgan, who's one of the people who did the early recommendation for the book, a dear friend. And that was a beautiful interview. where she commented and really centered the interview around this new language that you've created for the book. And she talked about language like radiant energy, radiant vision, the collapse of time, living into the moment, healing, danger, generative conversation, and a green heart, just to name a few. She says that one of the great pleasures that awaits anyone who reads this book is the way it refreshes and renews language to enable the reader to see and share their experience in a new way. So we could spend hours unpacking the language because it is just so poetic and beautiful. But I wanted to start, and I thought the perfect way to start was Radical Presence, which is both the subtitle of the book and also a thread that's woven throughout the book. So the question is, how did that idea of radical presence, what it represents, and the words themselves arise? And how has it been central to your journey?
Okay. I think by radical presence, I will talk a little bit about the collapse of time, which I spoke about in the second chapter of the book. And one of the examples I gave is that when you're falling or in an accident or something, we have expressions like time stands still or time stopped, and it doesn't. The clock keeps ticking, but we shift our awareness because of the intensity and the shock of what's happening, maybe whatever reasons there are, we shift into another state of awareness. A friend was telling me the other day about a motorcycle accident he had, and he could see that it was coming, and then everything just slowed down. And he said instead of just bang, it was slow and slow and slow. And then he felt something grab his shoulders, and instead of going forward with the motorcycle, he was pulled back and fell off the bike. And for some reason, that busy traffic all of a sudden wasn't busy, and he was taken out of the way. And it's that extraordinary state of being aware of so much more than we can normally take in. Our minds are just too busy keeping track of our surroundings and everything. When I woke myself on the morning of May 28th, 2013, I did it by hearing my voice say, "Oh, I have cancer." That was a really startling thought. And I was suddenly in a very quiet and open space, thinking I needed a miracle, and then realizing that it would be fine if the miracle was treatment, and it would be fine if it was time to leave this life. And it's not that cancer means you're going to die, but it is a leading cause of death. And I did have a lot of friends and family who had died from it. So it's not odd that I would have that thought. But it was just so still and so spacious. And after a lifetime of working so hard to achieve so many things I thought were important, in the stillness, I said to whatever it is we speak to, if I were allowed to ask for anything, what I would really like is for any love or grace that could come through me. I'd like that to be spent before I die. And throughout the book and since then, my life has been filled. I've had these moments leading up to what I call my dividing day, the diagnosis of cancer and then the life that came after it. But that request to live in a space of love and grace, I feel is fulfilled more and more and more. And it's just the ability for time to slow down, to hear what wants to enter in to the conversation, what could be healing, what could be an expression of love or bring some radiance when I'm in the creative process. All of those things feel like radical presence to me. Just watching something and then all of a sudden you just shift and go sideways.
Beautiful. So I think a segue, and it's a pretty simple question, but probably top of mind, and actually one of the things that somebody had written in, which is why did you write the book? How did it come into being, and what was the importance of it to help and support other people and yourself, I would suppose?
Well, this was one of those things. I was invited by a colleague to teach a choir workshop in Toronto. And I was in treatment at the time. And I was able to work through all of my treatment, which was really wonderful. But we went to lunch, and I was saying to her that cancer really wasn't the worst thing that had ever happened to me, and that I was having this really radiant experience, incredible conversations with everyone I met, stillness. There's lots of stillness when you're in treatment because you don't feel too good. And these revelations, these ideas and things, and we were just talking about it. And she said, I'm also the music director at a church. Would you come and be a lay speaker and talk about hope and healing? And I didn't see how I could do that because I hadn't been to church for decades. And I just didn't think it would be the right thing for me to do. But something stopped me because I had said that first morning, if there's any love or grace that could come through me, I would like that to be spent before I die. And so I said yes. And I went, and the talk was really well received. And so the next time the minister needed to be away, I was invited back. And it turned into a series of talks about hope and healing. And they said, you should publish these. You should really put them in a book and publish them. And it had taken me 8 years to write my first book. I really didn't think I had time to do another book. But then my oncologist who wrote the foreword for the book said, you shouldn't just go talk at one church. You should share this with a lot of people. And then another friend had, I was, talking about being unable to find a publisher for my first book. And they said, well, if you wrote a book about your experience with cancer, maybe that would get published. And so I thought, well, 3's the charm. And so, you do your research, and there are so many wonderful books written by doctors, by spiritual support people, by social workers and therapists. There was just no shortage of books, but a lot of them were books giving advice, making recommendations, books of history. Then there were a lot of patient stories about their journey and so on. And that really wasn't the book that was forming in me. The book that was forming in me was wrestling with all these things that would come up for me or people in the waiting room or while we were in treatment. My chemo days tended to be 10 to 12 hours long. So I met a lot of people. I had a lot of conversations. And what came to me is that we have a lot of what I call lonely questions, because they're questions that no one can answer for us. And part of the reason I started thinking there are some things people just can't give us answers to is because people were trying things, taking suggestions, advice, and it wasn't working. So they felt guilty. They felt that there was something wrong with them, that they couldn't heal. And I began to think about the difference between being healed and being cured. Because I don't think we can all be cured. It's not in the cards, it's not in this dimension. But I do believe we can all be healed. And by that I mean that we can come to a place of peace. We can come to terms with our lives, or if acceptance is not going to be our path, then maybe we're going to fight. I had a friend who refused to accept what was going on. Her cancer was back. They said there was nothing they could do, but she researched and she decided she could have a surgery. She would have to have an ostomy and a colostomy, all kinds of things removed. And her doctor thought she wouldn't live, so she got a second opinion and she found someone to do the surgery, and it gave her 3 more years. And then she got into a drug trial. And then she got more chemo. She ended up gaining about 5 years on her life, and in that time, she managed to get both of her adult children settled in houses and married, and she held her grandchildren. And so accepting what was going on, she came to her peace by fighting and by going after what she felt she still needed to do. That's not going to work for everybody. That's not a recipe. Somebody else might fight that hard and be gone in 5 weeks. And so I wanted to talk about what we go through as we find our own way. And yes, I talk about my way, but not because it's what you're supposed to do, but because of what I was learning about what I felt was the larger story, if that makes sense. And so I felt the book was called and wanted, and after 5 years, it was written. I lived long enough.
Yes. Thank goodness for all of us. And there's so much so many threads there, as always, that we could go into, but going back to the idea of hope, because that really sort of was the beginning of the talk and the book, from your story's perspective. And there is so much that we could say about the importance, and also I think for some people the struggle of finding hope, which, as you say, part of this book is about finding your own way.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start with a little paragraph from the book that leads into my question. So this is from page 49. And just a story in the chapter Hope. And so the story goes, I remember having lunch with a very wise and socially active elderly couple. They were discussing the world's woes and the actions they took to counter them in an almost casual, lighthearted way. I couldn't help but question their good humor in the face of calamity. My hostess laughed and said, "Oh, sweetheart, we don't do things because we believe they'll turn out the way we want them to. We do them because we think it's the right thing to do." So doing the right thing versus doing something for the finish line. How do you think that attitude can help to change perspective for people as they're approaching a life-threatening illness or life in general?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to not want a specific outcome and to do everything in our power to achieve it. And that's motivating, and often it can work out for us. In my life, I have found that expectation is a recipe for heartbreak, and that hope is what gets us out of bed in the morning. It's what moves us forward. So we work on something with the hope that it's gonna, we bake a cake hoping it'll turn out and we can serve it for dessert. We have hope for much larger and more serious things. Some things we hope for would take years to realize. And actually, speaking of cancer and all these things, you can work on a drug for 15 years, and after that time, it turns out it's a no-go, But surely in those 15 years, a lot was learned. And so for me, hope isn't based on the outcome. It's based on the life I'm going to have while I work for it. I'm going to meet people. I'm going to have conversations. I'm going to experience all kinds of things in my body, in the world around me. I'm going to look at nature differently. Children are going to strike me differently. And just everything can happen. And so my hope is that I can show up for it. I can show up for the process of my life. And then faith is not so that I get my desired outcome. It's that I have faith that whatever outcome I get is going to teach me, inform me, lead me to my next. Sometimes it looks like a wall. If you back up enough, you realize if you get a ladder, you can get over top of it, So it's not a static, it's not a something. It's a life force, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. Hope as a life force. I think that it really puts it into perspective when people are feeling hopeless, right? And it's
Maybe one more little story.
yeah, of course.
I used to feel quite sorry for myself that I hadn't found a life partner and had children, because that was a big part of what I dreamed for. And one morning, as I sat to do my morning practices and things, I was really cranky about it, and I was crying my little heart out. And I said, I just can't live the rest of my life like this. And then I started laughing because the question that came in sideways was, well, can you live today like this? And I said, well, of course I can do anything for a day. And so I was like, okay. I was going too far into the future. I was biting off too much. And what I needed to do was live into the day, spend the love I had, and if something was going to come to me, it would come. I realized children didn't have to come through my body. They could come to my door for a singing lesson. I've had plenty of children in my life, and it's pure joy. So, it's just giving up a certain amount in order to appreciate what I have.
In the chapter cardinal matters, I've got another quote that I want to read.
Okay.
So it's on page 37.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like in some ways this would have been good, heartfelt advice to yourself in those on that day. You say feelings are not facts and they will not determine whether you live or die. They can, however, mess with whether or not you find peace and reconciliation. So, in yoga philosophy, there's a concept called the koshas. And so they consider that we have these layers of being, where the outermost is the physical body, which is the most dense. And then as we unpack the layers, we go into breath, and then into mind and emotion. And we continue to move down into more ethereal layers. So beneath feeling and emotion is wisdom. And then there's bliss, which could be interpreted as the soul, but it's really that sense of contentment, I think, more than anything. From your perspective and philosophy, what is it that we need to unravel emotions to get to that deeper layer? And what is the deeper layer? Is it wisdom? Is it soul? What guides us into that place of contentment, of understanding hope, of, as you said before, that sense that of presence and not looking into the future? Does that make sense?
Yes. I'm going to go with the part where you say, what do we unravel? How do we unravel? Because I think that's another lonely question. We come into life with certain DNA. So we're carrying information from the ancestors. We are born into a family, a community, a church, whatever, people who teach us how to be a human being according to them, so that we can fit in and thrive and be part of humanity. This experience is so utterly unique for each and every one of us. 6 children in our family, and how we all came out of the same spot is a real wonder. We just didn't do the same thing with that. We were at a different place in that constellation, and we all had different things to work on in this life. So I feel like that those imprints from generations past, that formation from the community in the present, and then as we start to develop our own awareness and we make choices, and we learn things because of those choices. Certain people are our preference. We make friends with them. We read certain books. We like certain subjects. We have a gift for something. You know, all of those things lead us into the world. And we think of so many things as mistakes, as bad choices, as flaws and failures. And I just don't see it that way. One of the things I thought I'd better do when I got the news was make a bucket list, because I didn't have too much time. What did I really need to do? And I sat with paper and pen for a really long time. And I realized I don't have a bucket list. It's not that there aren't things I want to do and love doing, but it's not important. And the reason is because I've lived my life. And one of the things I say in the book is I did so many stupid things. It's amazing I lived long enough to get cancer. But they made me who I am. I can't imagine my life without those relationships and those so-called mistakes. Because another thing I always say is what looks like hell on the windshield looks great in the rear view mirror, you know? And so for me, the untangling isn't because I messed up. It's because of what I know now. And so I can take what I was given or what I was working on, and I can untangle all of that, and I can reweave it with more light, with different colors, with what I know now. And so it looks different to me. It's the thing that happened. That's never going to change. And it's not always what I did. Sometimes people did some rotten things to us. You know, there's all kinds of stuff to deal with. And with the worst of it, we just always have this choice. We make a new choice. We do another thing, and our story changes. Am I answering any of these questions?
I love what you're saying. It's okay. The questions are good. Yeah, the questions are great prompts for the conversation. Generative conversation is one of the things
Right. Yeah.
talk about, right? Maybe since we're on that, you could just explain what that means and how it was meaningful for you in writing the book and your story.
Yes. Again, in all the conversations I had, there's a lot of feeling misunderstood. It's really hard for people who haven't experienced what you're going through to get inside of it with you. There's no reason why they should. And you can't get inside of the experience they're having, you know? And so how do we not criticize and blame one another for failing to understand, but rather stay in a place of learning from one another? And so part of what made me think about this whole idea of generative conversation was it's from spiral dynamics and integral philosophy. What they talk about is that we have all these stages of development. We have physical stages, emotional stages, cognitive stages, and they would say also spiritual stages and stages of awareness. Different stages of the ability to become fully present and set our own preferences aside and enter into what is in front of us. And so they described it, they just use color codes because they don't want it to be like some stage is better than another. Learning to sit up isn't better than rolling over. Learning to crawl isn't, learning to walk isn't better than crawling. We need them. And we all go through them and we all return to them. If something falls under the desk, I'm going to crawl. So we don't outgrow them. We need them. And so what they're saying is, like, you got red, orange, amber, green, turquoise, all of this. If you're green and you're talking to somebody who's having an orange conversation, they're not being stubborn. They're not being resistant. They can't talk green. But you have been at orange. So your job is to talk orange. And lots of times when we're in these healing caregiver situations, we think the caregiver has to do all of the adjusting and bending and accommodating. But if the patient happens to have more awareness, then they're going to have to do the listening and the adjusting. It's just sometimes like that. And so in generative conversation, we're listening. We're listening for the language of the other, not just do these words make cognitive sense, but how is their spirit, their soul speaking to me? How's their heart speaking to me? What are they telling me about the state of their life? And from my days of teaching singing, we talk a lot about quality. And I always say, you call somebody and they say, hello, hello, hi. We get so much information from the way they say hello if we're listening. Sometimes we're too full of the reason we're calling them to hear it. And so in generative conversation, the part of us that needs to listen, listens. And the part of us that has capacity to respond to what is and not what we would like it to be, will respond to what is. And the part of us that simply can't understand what's going on, that can't even understand enough to ask a good question, needs to provide that information, rather than resisting. And sometimes the place we come to is that we're not good people to go through this together. Sometimes we are at the threshold. We came into the room, we've been here, and it's really, not all relationships hold through chronic illness, through any kinds of difficulties. And sometimes strangers are better. We have no agenda for each other, so we don't bring our baggage into it. Generative conversations can happen in all kinds of circumstances.
There's so much value in that for anyone, right? Life lessons or advice for life for everyone in the world, right? Listening and listening and the importance of those kind of generative conversations. It was a good segue because I think it's super important that you touched on it and that we don't forget to talk about caregivers and the role that they play in the book and in the thinking that you went through in writing the book. And one of the things that you just said reminded me of this quote from the book that says, "We can't hold hands if we can't walk at the same pace." And that was one of the first stories that I heard you talk about that really struck me. which is that if somebody's up here and somebody's down here, they have to come down, and that can be so challenging. So,
And it can be joyful.
yes, yes. Once you get over that piece that you were just talking about, which is your assumptions and your agenda, right? Where it's like, my agenda is to go for a speed walk. Well,
Yeah, whatever. No, it's good.
I can't do that, right? So, I have one more quote that I'm going to read, and it's from page 56.
Okay.
And it maybe it's a bit of a repeat of what you just said, but again, I think the caregiver piece is important part of what you offer. So the quote says, "The relationship between someone who's ill and a caregiver can be rich and beautiful. It can also be uniquely challenging. It's like an improvisational dance in which each learns to anticipate the other's move in order to interact gracefully with harmony and rhythmic synchronicity." So beautifully written. So maybe it's a repeat of what you just said. Maybe I feel like you can expand on it though, but I love this idea of synchronicity, the importance of this dance between the partner, the patient, and the caregiver. So if you have anything more to add around that, I'd love to hear it. And just this idea of a partnership.
You know, we all have these instances of someone being on our mind, and we think, oh, I should call them. And if we do, we find out their cat just died, or they just broke their ankle, or something like that. And if we don't, we find out later and we wish we had. And so I think lots of times we will feel an urge, an idea that we should do something or other, but we're not sure it's right. And we all have different feelings about, some people feel like, well, if you're sick and going through treatment, I'll just leave you alone so that, you have your privacy and you can rest. Other people just want to talk and bring you all sorts of things. And very often, if we just get still and think about it and start to feel that person in our being as we know them, or as our thoughts are coming to us, we'll know what to do. And there again, I think, let's not do what's prescribed. Let's not assume somebody, that was the real, we put out, one of the things I said in the book was, I just couldn't eat anything. And the thing that finally settled was chocolate milk and potato chips. And so she said, I will never again make someone 14 vegetable soup topped with kale. I'll just bake cookies, And so it's thinking that we're supposed to show up with wholesome soup. But maybe we just want to ask the person, what are you eating these days? Or we'll just get a hunch that maybe we should just take tea, But so often, I'm not doing a good job of this because I can't think of an example on the spot, but we override a lot of our intuitive hits. And when we're in that dance, when we're in that flow, and when things are going well, we're we're just aware. We're just aware of other people and the way they intersect our lives. And when someone is separate away from us, we still feel them because we love them. We have this thing we call love. And I was hearing a thing about mothers' cells are in babies, and baby cells are in their mothers. And people always talk about that mother's intuition. There are all of these extraordinary ways we connect and feel one another. We're just drawn to certain people. They just own a part of us. They have a place in our heart, and that's it. And I think just not overriding those impulses can be really helpful. Yeah.
You talk about the golden rule. There's a whole chapter about the golden rule, and the quote I said before, we cannot hold hands if we cannot walk at the same pace, comes from that chapter. And so I'll let you explain what the golden rule is, but it does make me think that each of us are sort of, and the golden rule is fantastic, and we're programmed to believe it to be true, but without that intuition, and that intuition is really what brings the golden rule into that next and more healing ritual, I'll call it, for lack of a better word. So do you want to explain what you mean by the golden rule and what that how it relates to the book and this? And
Well, it's just a little extension of that. So often we say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so if I like cards and flowers, I'll give you cards and flowers, but maybe you don't like cards and flowers. Maybe you'd prefer chocolates. And so doing unto others as you would have them do unto you is paying attention to what they would want and need and providing that, even if it isn't something you would necessarily want, And so for me, the golden rule is not a horizontal exchange. It is the capacity to align ourselves with whatever we think that system is within us that allows us to listen, perceive, understand what is being called and needed. Another way I would say it is sometimes our thinking is just too slow and it's too busy, or our hearts are too conflicted. But there is intuition, there is guidance, there is deeper knowing. And for those of us who walk a spiritual path, there is a sense of that guiding. And it's faster. And it's better. And I think that that's where the golden rule really works best.
so just to clarify that, you said it's faster. Intuition is faster, that sense of connection is faster. Okay, so it drops in more quickly than the overthinking mind.
Yes.
Okay.
And I experience it a lot when I'm teaching. When I first started teaching, I felt like, I was trying to teach what I was taught, which was useless because people were teaching me that for my voice. And this person in front of me didn't have my voice. And I realized I was going to have to make it up. I was going to have to figure out what they needed. And I remember one day, nothing I was trying was working. And I looked out the window to the left of me and I said, I'm going to turn back to the piano and my hand is going to play something and it had better be right. And it was. And so my preparation for teaching is to declutter and I truly feel myself shift. It's almost as though you're an actor going on stage to play a character. I feel a shift in me. And when I'm teaching someone, I don't know what we're going to do. I hear how they're singing for today, and that gives me the information. But my response is often very weird. My feet were hurting one day while I was teaching. They were just killing me. And I took my shoes off and it didn't get better. And so just out of the blue, I say to my student who was having trouble with her high notes, she just couldn't get them out. I said, would you mind taking your shoes off? And she said, well, yes, I would. Why? I wasn't going to tell her because my feet hurt. So then she, big sigh, she took her shoes off. And every time she went for a high note, she gripped her toes really tightly. And so I took her over to the mirror. Well, she couldn't feel it. She didn't know. I took her over to the mirror and had her watch, and she was stunned because she had not had any awareness to feel that. But my feet felt it. And so I started to learn that my body experiences people's voices. Well, then I read a few years later that every cell in our skin has sound receptors. And so we feel the sound, maybe even more than we hear it. And the sound is resonating our bones, it's stimulating all our glands and organs, our brain. And so there, my feet were faster than my brain. You know what I mean? So, and there are just all kinds of experiences and processes like this. And again, the book is not meant to teach you this. It's meant to say, honor yourself. If you're having an experience and you think there's something for you to learn about, go for it. Go after it. And it will bring you healing.
That story makes me think really that, this book is a beginning or maybe it's a middle actually of a new phase in your life, let's say. But as with everything in life, it's more like another chapter, right? And so everything that you lived before and are still living in your career as a music teacher also informs what has gone into this book, the message that you have. And so there's this beautiful thread through your life that leads to here and carries on to whatever comes next.
And a way to use a metaphor we used earlier, it has been rewoven by cancer.
Yeah, beautiful. So I think we have only time for one more question, and this one is a bit maybe a tricky one. You talk a lot about how this book is a kind of a counter, in my words, a counter response to all the books on the top 10 tips or what you need to do to heal, to cure, to whatever, get through this get through cancer, your journey with cancer. So, and they're very pervasive, right? People are looking for that. And this book is so much more than that. And there's so much permission throughout the book to find your own way. These are your stories, and they're, again, going with that idea of a thread. I think we've all been in a place where it feels impossible to find our beginning, especially when we're under stress of something like a diagnosis. So as a means to inspire, not to give instruction, I would love for you to talk about what the essential practices or tools are that supported your healing, kind of more specifically. What are the things that you found were essential in terms of a practice that led to this book?
I think the one essential thing has been to focus on whether or not there is any healing or grace that can come through me. And I word it that way because at the level of my personality, I don't think I'm good enough to do that. I don't live in perfect love. I'm not always fabulous. And so it's just, that is just before me all the time. I just remind myself, no matter what comes up, all kinds of things happen, and I feel myself starting to, and then I remind myself that that's what I'm here for. That's my work. It's my joy. That's my bliss, to use a word you used earlier. That longing, that hope, that desire, that puts everything in perspective. It, I don't know, if I still did drugs, it would be like taking a toke. You know, it's just, you know, it's good. It's just so, and I can't recommend that to anybody else. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you need a practice, try some stuff. You know, listen to yourself. Take a walk and listen to yourself. You know, just so much is revealed to me in nature. And so, but I just always, since my dividing day, that has been my guiding thing. It sounds pretty simplistic, but that's what I got for you. But I don't think that would necessarily work for anybody else. That's just what I do, what I said. I did get to it, and this might be something you can do. I did a workshop with a lovely woman named Oriah Mountain Dreamer. She wrote an amazing poem that I can't remember the name of in this moment. Somebody here will remember it. It went, you know, all over the world. And the whole workshop, this was all we did. She gave us a question, the invitation. Thank you so much, Lisa. It was called The Invitation, and here was her invitation. Here's the sentence you write. I want, and you finish the sentence. And then you write, no. What I really want is, and you finish the sentence. And you keep doing that for an hour. And I don't think I passed the workshop. I didn't quite get it. But on my dividing day, I got it. I knew what I really wanted. I just had, and again, I'm going to go back to that long arc of history. Everything that I came into this life with that had to be worked on, everything I was socialized to do, educated to do, that I had to work on, all of that had to be done before I could finally wake up one morning and say, you know, all I want is if I could be used for that, that would be great. I'm done with my business. I have to remind myself all the time, because the longer I live, the more tempting it is to get pulled back into all the stuff, you know. But that's my North Star.
It is a journey, not an end.
Correct.
A practice.
Yeah.
So those are my questions. I hope that they've inspired some questions from all of you that are here. So hold on to them. We're going to finish this part with Jocelyn. You want to read? I'm going to read a little passage from a short passage from the book. And then we've got some gifts for a few people, and then we'll go to questions.
Yeah. So Caitlin suggested the end of the book, and I do like this part. Despite all I've experienced and learned, despite all the delicious reflection and wonder, less has changed than I had imagined would. I live today much as I always have. There are essential chores that never go anywhere. I do them, but not always with the gratitude they merit. I partly design my time by writing tasks in the cells of a day planner, and then I throw myself at the day. I make my bed on the way out of it and take my own sweet time with the coffee I love so much. I try to keep the promises I have made. I mostly do for and with others what I said I would do. I do for myself some of what I said I would, knowing full well most things will be left undone. They are dust in the wind. They will become the soil for another lifetime. There are over 8 billion people making up this day, and I bet they each have many great ideas they too will not get to. The universe is not going to run out of ideas, but you and I will run out of time. In light of that, I wonder if the most important thing about this day might not be how to spend it, but rather who I am while I spend it. What do I truly care about? What do I still want to learn and spend in the days left to me? I keep coming back to love. Without it, I cannot think of another power or quality that matters. A lot of distractions stumble into my days, and I must constantly remind myself that this world and the brief time I inhabit it may limit my life, but not my love. Nothing is too big or small for love. Like the pretty river, love has its ways of flowing through everything it encounters. My eyes return one last time to the horizon, earth and sky, gravity and reflection, life and radiance. My death might one day belong to cancer, but I have not lost my life to it. I gather what remains of my vim. I'm going to take a different way home.
It's so nice to hear you read it.